Welcome to the Ghostly Chronicles. Deep in the wilderness of northern Maine lay the Black Quarry, a yawning pit carved out of the earth long ago and abandoned for reasons lost to time. Local legends whispered that it wasn't abandoned by choice but cursed after miners unearthed something they shouldn't have, a black glistening obelisk buried deep in the stone. They called it and those who touched it were never seen again. Simon, a seasoned adventurer with a penchant for debunking myths, heard the story at a roadside diner and dismissed it as small-town superstition. But when the waitress mentioned a hefty cash prize offered by a historical society for a photo of the obelisk, Simon's interest was piqued. The quarry, overgrown and desolate, seemed ripe for exploration. Equipped with climbing gear, a flashlight and his trusty camera, Simon arrived at the quarry at dusk. The pit was deeper than he expected, its jagged walls descending into inky blackness. A rusted sign at the entrance read, "Danger, do not enter." It was clear no one had dared disturb this place in decades. As Simon rappelled into the depths, he felt a strange pressure in the air, as though the quarry itself were watching him. The rock seemed unnaturally smooth, polished in places where no human hand had worked. His flashlight flickered, and for a moment, he thought he heard distant whispers, low, guttural, and impossible to pinpoint. At the bottom, the air was colder than it should have been, and the ground was unnervingly damp despite no sign of water. The faint glow of bioluminescent moss illuminated his path, leading him deeper into a narrow tunnel. Simon followed the glow until he entered a vast cavern, its walls shimmering with black crystal veins. At the center stood the obelisk. The heart of the quarry was unlike anything he had ever seen, 10 feet tall, jet black and pulsing faintly as though alive. Its surface was carved with symbols that seemed to shift when he tried to focus on them. Against his better judgment, Simon approached, raising his camera. As he snapped the photo, the obelisk emitted a low hum that reverberated through the cavern. The ground trembled, and the veins in the walls began to glow faintly, pulsing in sync with the obelisk. Simon backed away, but it was too late. Shadows began to pool at the edges of the cavern, forming into indistinct shapes. They moved unnaturally, their forms flickering like candlelight. One stepped closer, its face featureless save for 2 pinpricks of light where eyes should have been. A voice, guttural and layered, filled the space. "You've awakened what sleeps. Payment is required." Simon turned and ran, the tunnel seeming to stretch endlessly ahead of him. The shadows followed, their whispers growing louder, their shapes multiplying. His flashlight flickered out, and the bioluminescent moss began to dim as though the light itself was being consumed. Panic gripped him as the air grew heavier, the shadows clawing at his heels. Finally, he reached the rope he had used to descend. Scrambling up with every ounce of strength, he felt cold, formless hands brushing his legs, pulling at his boots. The whispers turned to screams, but he didn't look back. With one final surge, he climbed over the edge and collapsed onto solid ground. When he looked down into the quarry, it was silent. The whispers had stopped, and the shadows were gone, but the obelisk's faint glow was visible even from the surface, like a malevolent eye watching him. Simon returned to town, shaken, but alive. He developed the photo in a motel room that night, only to find the obelisk missing from the image. Instead, the photo showed dozens of faces, blurred and screaming, staring out at him from the darkness of the quarry. He destroyed the photo, but the damage was done. In the days that followed, Simon began hearing whispers in quiet moments, seeing faint shadows in the corners of his vision. As the weeks passed, the whispers grew louder and the shadows drew closer. One night, he disappeared without a trace. The only clue left behind was a single photograph pinned to his motel wall, a blurry image of the Black Quarry with the faint glow of the obelisk at its center, and Simon's face among the screaming figures. Please like, share and subscribe.